started. I know there's a lot happening today, a lot of excitement, and we're also very excited to have Pru Foster here with us today. So we're going to honor everyone's time and start with a word of prayer. Good and gracious God, we gather on this day, thankful for your presence in our midst, mindful of our call to be proper stewards, mindful of our call to help care for creation. And I pray, Lord, that as we listen and learn, as we ask questions and ponder, that you would guide us in the way that you know is right for this community in this time, for what we need to do to be faithful to you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce our speaker. So our speaker is Pru Foster, who is a member of the Potomac Garden Club with Karen. So he has many other, and Bob, many other credentials, but that is, of course, a critical one. Pru has a PhD in astrophysics. She started charting stars. Then she moved more into climate and environmental issues, and you studied frogs in Japan.
Yeah.
And she is the author of this book, A Drop of Grace, Finding and Protecting Our Common Ground.
Wonderful.
And she's going to talk today about climate change and what we can do here in Potomac. So, Pru, come forward.
Super. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I don't even know where to start. There was so much that the words that I heard this morning that sparked connections for what I wanted to talk about today. And but I guess I'll start with the story of my book. When I left academia about 7 years ago because I was tired of sitting in front of a computer and I wanted to garden all day long. And but I couldn't leave without. I thought this was going to be. I was going to write this book. And I could lead climate change and activism. I've been an activist my whole life. I am the kid who picked up earthworms off the pavement and put them into the soil and worried about everybody and everything. And I still do that too. So I thought I would write this book and I would put that all behind me and go to Eden, spend my time in Eden. And I wrote this book to my in-laws who are evangelical Christians who welcomed me into their family in a way that just blew me away. I grew up in Western Massachusetts in the town of Amherst. It's a hugely liberal town. The only religious services I ever went to were to the Jewish services with my best friend and the Quaker services. And this was actually my very first church service in a Presbyterian church, or really any, I don't know what you'd call straight Christian church.
Well, welcome.
It was lovely. It was lovely. I really enjoyed it. And so I wrote that when I met them on the airplane to Omaha with my soon to be husband, my husband started listening to things I probably shouldn't talk about when we got there. And eventually we came up with the catchphrase, probably it's best if you don't speak at all. But that wasn't true at all. But it was the first time that my relatives had met a liberal from Massachusetts who studied climate change, and I am a vegetarian, and they had never met a vegetarian before. I had never met an evangelical or spent time with an evangelical before. So it was a huge education on the two sides. Yeah. And I wrote this book to them just saying, why aren't you guys concerned about climate change? This was my plea to them. Why aren't you worried about that? And so it's really about finding common ground, which is what they have taught me. And speaking with love and humility to other people who come from different places, which is really what they taught me, that it's just there. And I'm so excited that your congregation, do we use that word for this?
Yes.
Is mixed. It's just got a huge mix of people. What an opportunity to learn from each other and to figure out fun and honey, to find out how to talk to others and meet people where they are. I really love that. That's definitely a big part of me. So it's finding that common ground, of course, which is also the common ground is the planet that we live on, right? So I wrote this book to my in-laws, and I have to say, the ones that read it, they were all like, "Oh yeah, I believe all that stuff." So anyway, I was like, "Well, really?" So I brought a copy. I don't know if Rob has one, or Karen has one, but you guys have one. But I also brought one for you. Okay, I brought a couple. So So I'm a rather, please interrupt me with questions, and I'll try not to dwell too much on detail. I may well have been diagnosed if I'd been born in this day and age because I'm quite intense about all the details of things. And I've created for you guys, if you care, a list of all the resources that I used in this talk. As well as on the back, a little worksheet if you wanted to. Because I'm going to talk about the way that I've come about to think about climate change activism, because climate change activism or other environmental issues or any activism we're involved in these days and is so overwhelming. And we get all this information coming at us, and what do we do with it? So, and when I talk to people about climate change activism, they always get, I'll say, what do you think we should do? And the things that people list are, we should fly less, we should turn down the thermostat, change our light bulbs. And that's all what I would call lifestyle actions. And often when I tell people I'm a climate change activist, I get this immediate, I can't change that. I have to do this for my work. I have to do that. I can't turn down the thermostat, it'll be cold. And I get stuck because I sometimes can't think on my feet. And but I know there's other things to do other than just lifestyle changes. And so there's all these other ways that we can affect climate change through financial, political actions, and community building, community and engagement. So I'll talk about those later, but there's a list of resources and this worksheet if you decide that you want to come up with actions, climate actions that you might take for these 5 new categories. So and I'll get there. Anyway, so I've lived in Potomac about 6 years now, and I think it's a place that's ripe for climate action. And I think that we can do a lot here in Potomac. So I'm really interested in doing a number of different actions in our town about climate change, and I think they could be really effective. Okay, so I have 3 topics sort of today. Why do we want to reduce emissions? I'll really not go into detail on that, presuming that most of us have heard those stories already. What are major carbon emission sources? Hopefully maybe make a shift in some of your thinking about what are major carbon emission sources, and then those 5 heavy climate actions. So this is kind of not so bright, but year is going along this way. So here we are at 2025, and then the temperature difference from the average, the historical average. So, it was about, the temperature wobbled around till about 1920, maybe raised a little bit in the early, the 40s through the 80s. And then in about 1980, the temperature started shooting up. And we see here 2024, this is an estimate for 2025. So we don't know where we're going to go yet. We're only not halfway through 2025 yet. What is going on here? And possibly here, there might be a continued increase. We don't know exactly. It may be that we had an El Nino, which usually rises these temperatures, but then in the beginning of 2024, and then that El Nino decayed, and usually temperatures drop back down. It didn't this time. It seemed to stay up there. There was a volcano that put a lot of water into the atmosphere. And I've given away my question was, what's the most potent greenhouse gas on the planet? Does anybody know?
What's the most what?
Potent greenhouse gas on the planet?
Methane.
Water.
Water.
Water causes most of the greenhouse effect on the planet.
Oh.
Water vapor in the atmosphere. Methane is really potent. Probably that language, it would be methane. Any molecule of methane creates more warming than any molecule of anything else. But the one that does the most to warm the planet is water. It's why water in the atmosphere and the greenhouse effect is why we are 30 degrees warmer than we would be without it. And all the water on the planet would be frozen if we didn't have the greenhouse effect. So anyway. So what's going on there? We don't know. Could it be an acceleration of climate change? We don't know yet. We hope not. So, the other thing I wanted to point out on here is this 1.5 degrees C. We hit that mark last year. Are we going to stay up there? Let's hope not. Let's hope that we can rein it in. Let's hope we don't shoot up higher. And it's an important number, 1.5 degrees. It's the number at which, and I really don't want you to look at these. These are just triggers for me to remember. 1.5 degrees is important that we stay below. Scientists have suggested that we stay below 1.5 degrees because above 1.5 degrees, we're likely to get some big feedbacks in the climate system. The ice caps might melt. Ice reflects a lot of sunlight. When those ice caps melt, there's going to be more heat coming into the planet. We might get some sort of runaway heating. The permafrost might melt. That's going to burp out a whole bunch of methane into the atmosphere at 1.5 degrees, above 1.5 degrees. So That's one thing we want to avoid. And also above 1.5 degrees, the climate impacts on humans, not just that physical effect, but on humans with more drought, more extremely hot weather. Our crops may struggle to grow where they're growing currently. That starts happening. And as a Christian community or any caring community, of course, these impacts are going to hurt the people with the least, more than those of us who are lucky enough to have the money to bail ourselves out of situations, or to, if the cost of the giant doubled, which would be gobsmacking because it's already so high, many of us could find ways to survive or rely on neighbors. Not everyone in our community, of course. There are people who would certainly struggle with that, and it would hurt us all, no doubt. But so we want to stay below 1.5 if we can. I don't know if you can read that. Sorry, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
To stay below 1.5 degrees C, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is all the governments in the world, got together and figured out that by 2030, so in 5 years, we want to reduce our global emissions from our peak emissions by 45%. So that works out to be 2.5 tons, if you divide that by all the people on the planet and how much carbon we can emit. That works out to be 2.5 tons per person of carbon that we can emit each year. That's called the fair share of carbon emissions. And we of course, need to get to net zero by 2050 because greenhouse gases stay in the atmosphere a really long time. Well, carbon dioxide does stay in the atmosphere a really long time. And so we have to stop emitting carbon dioxide or we'll just continue to rise. So we have to get to net zero. This was just to show you that it is financially feasible for us to address climate change. Down here, we have an estimate of what it would cost annually to address climate change and meet that goal of 2030 to get everybody down to 2.5 tons. And that will cost about $8.6 trillion a year. It is a huge amount of money. But I will point out that the governments around the world give $7 trillion a year in subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. To me, that seems like, why don't we just do that? Because every dollar we spend slowing down climate change saves us $6 in damages. And that doesn't even quantify the health impacts. So we spent almost 12 trillion in 2020 to respond to COVID. It is a good chunk. It's a good 8% of the global GDP. But it is feasible. It's not money that we just pour down the drain. It's money that goes into green jobs, saves us money in the future. If we had the will, we definitely have the wherewithal to do it.
I don't understand the US, you said they were subsidies, that one, yeah.
Yeah. Those
What
are
is- Who does,
the governments around the
that
world.
money we're spending? No.
Partly the US. The US subsidizes fossil fuel industries, but so does the other governments around the world.
Oh, so you just converted the worldwide subsidies to US dollars?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
got
you.
it.
Sorry. Yes. I will jump things like that. So thank you for asking. All right. So it is feasible. We can do it.
And you said the target date is
2030, we want to get down to 45% of our emissions. So this is a graph that shows the tons of carbon dioxide per year that are being emitted. And this is our peak, is shown in purple. I don't have a number for Maryland or Potomac.
No.
And this is current emissions. So our current emissions per capita are about equal. The per capita emissions are about the same as they were at peak. But our total emissions have increased because there's more people on the planet. So from our peak, we're at peak now. Last year was the most carbon we've emitted every year. In the US, however, this is the global, the fair share. In the US, we have reduced our peak from 22 in, I think it was 2010. We've reduced our emissions from 22 down to about 14. So we reduced our emissions about 30%. That's great. We're doing great. Still, we're way above fair share. We can play games with that. We can ask foreign nations if they'd sell us some of their carbon emissions. That's a carbon tax idea. So that is a way we could do that. It'll be hard for us to get to 2.5 tons per person, but we do have wealth. Maryland has reduced its emissions already. We were lower than the US at peak per capita. And we've reduced our emissions more than any other state in the country. Per person.
And that is primarily automotive.
And the power sources.
Cold going down.
Coal going down, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and, again, we're still at about 14, I think, no, we're down at 12 or 10 or 12, 10. That's the number, 10. 10 tons per person in Maryland, that's pretty good. We're doing pretty good. But we should be pleased about that and know that there's still progress to be made, but we're doing good. What do you think? You're more than welcome to join us if you like.
What is?
What do you think the emissions per capita in Potomac might be?
higher than Maryland.
Higher than Maryland. How much higher?
Why?
Twice.
Oh.
82 tons of carbon per person
Wow.
in Maryland.
Wow.
In Potomac, sorry, in Potomac. 82 tons, yeah.
What is the source? I don't
Yeah.
understand why.
Yeah, why is so high?
Because what your emissions go with your wealth. The more money that we spend, the more emissions we're responsible for. We may take more international flights. Our houses may be bigger and we have to heat them more. Maybe we buy blueberries all year round. Blueberries have a huge carbon footprint. I know, I love blueberries. But they are flown, they're flown in, right? Most berries, except in season. It's great to eat in season when, dare I say it, when God intended us to eat them, right? So,
It's lifestyle.
it is
Yeah.
lifestyle. Heated swimming pool, yeah. The pump, we have a swimming pool, the pump in our swimming pool uses a lot of electricity, so. Get to that in a second, I think that might be next, actually. So that's something that really bothers me about Potomac, and I think it's something that we can really work on, because it's my opinion that we have the wealth, the knowledge. Potomac is great, everybody you meet in Potomac has such varied experiences and exciting things they've done in their lives. And so, and we're all, many people are highly educated, not that that's the only way to get knowledge, obviously, but other people have wealth of experience knowledge. And we have the connections in Potomac to do better. And I think we can do better. And I'd really like to see us do better. It's my current mission. All right, so why, that's all the why. And now I wanted to talk about the major sources of carbon emissions. This is a little plot over here that you'll typically see that shows carbon emissions divided by economic sector. So the fraction of the pie that each of these sectors uses. So electric power and industry each contribute about a quarter of our carbon emissions. Transportation about 28. There's so many different ways you can cut this pie. So you may see different numbers, but and then residential and commercial is just 13%. I really hate this graph because what do I do with that? What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything to me. Where my transportation, is it my driving? Is it my blueberries? Is it my flight to the UK that I'm taking next week? You know, it's complicated to know whether it's my iPhone even, right?
This is our Potomac.
This is the world.
economic
This is
world.
global. This is the
Global,
global.
but what does it mean, economic sector?
So these are the different economic sectors. These are.
Oh, those are the
Yeah,
sectors. I
yeah.
thought the whole graph was looking at one
No,
of
sorry.
the population.
Sorry, no, it's the whole, thank you for asking that. So I prefer, so that I can have an impact and know what my choices are, I prefer when we look at how much is being emitted by the end product use, rather. So with something that we call, it's at the top, that's all right, but so we look at instead emissions by sector. It's, I think, better to do it by product. How much emissions are from a given product? And we do that with something called a life cycle analysis, which if you're not aware of and you're a numbers geek, you'll want to become aware of that. It analyzes everything from the extraction of that material, the manufacturing of that material, say into the iPhone, the moving of that iPhone from the factory to me, to home, to the store, to home, the use of that, if it gets broken, the electricity, all that stuff, and then also the disposal. So something that was really shocking to me was an analysis that looked at carbon emissions from the life cycle analysis point of view and looked at the impact of household and consumption in households. In the United States, 80% of our emissions can be contributed to households. In my mind, it was always industry, and I could blame the bad guys out there, but it's walking that walk, as that we heard about today, is that all of us are responsible for walking that walk if we want to address climate change and trying to reduce our own emissions. Because that's where the emissions are coming from. It's from what we buy, from our lifestyle behaviors and also our financial choices and all those sorts of things.
It says the wealthiest 1%
Yeah,
emit as much as the poorest.
50% global, that's a
Doesn't that
global.
contradict what you said about Potomac?
No.
No.
I think it supports it.
I don't, so if you take the wealthiest 1%, which
That, let's say it's Potomac.
let's say it's Potomac, then you could say that but that's probably not 1% of the globe, right? 1% of the
No,
global population.
no.
But if we took all the Potomacs around the world, say,
Yeah.
and they added up to 1% of the population, then we would be emitting 50 times, well, we'd be emitting 50% of the global emissions. Well, no, I'm not saying that right.
Mm.
We'd be emitting as much as the poorest 50% on the planet.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's way, 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 way.
Yeah.
50 times as much.
As the, per person, no, not per person. So if you took the poorest 50% are each only emitting about 1 ton of carbon, right?
Yeah.
We're emitting about 80, each of us.
So there's
So,
only 1% of us.
yeah, but 80 is a bigger increase than
I
the
don't get
50.
the math.
All right.
Go ahead. I don't want to hang you.
Okay. I'm happy to go through that later.
Yeah.
I love that. So, anyway. We could just think about our per capita emissions and that we need to get to our fair share. So, as I said, I sometimes get flustered and I can't remember other things to say to people when they say, I can't change my lifestyle. So I came up with these 5 handy climate actions to remind me, but also to provide me with a task list. Because otherwise I get overwhelmed and I feel like I'm not doing enough and I just, and then I spin out and then I don't do anything. So if I have my 5 handy climate actions on the back of the sheet, which I've made a list for myself, then I feel like I'm hitting it. I'm keeping track nowadays of what I'm doing, because then I feel less anxious about it all. I realize, okay, I am doing stuff. I'm doing my bit, but I also am feeling joy. Like that's so important that we feel joy, because the world is wonderful and fantastic. And I think we're supposed to do that. I think, and also it rejuvenates us and other things, but I do think it's part of our purpose is to feel joy. So my 5 handy climate actions, pardon me. This are, first of all, there's lifestyle, those things that we've already been talking about, right?
Right.
There's political actions. Uncle Sam wants you. Well, you guys may all remember that campaign. Uncle Sam wants you. So there's political actions. Middle finger. I'm not a fan of banks or investment companies, so they got the middle finger, and I can remember that. Engagement, the engagement ring, right? That's being engaged in our minds, being engaged with our family and our friends, being engaged with the news, that sort of thing. And then the pinky finger, which can be, you can either think of pinky swears is what linked community together when we were kids, or if, there's other connotations of pinky, which is community associated. So that's another way to remember it. It's sort of the pinkies and communists, I suppose. So, so let's start with lifestyle. I'll go through all 5 of these, and maybe you guys can chip in ideas that you have. The first thing to do, up at the top, that headline is, if you don't know where your carbon is coming from, that's a great thing to do. That's a great task for you to have on your thumb. And that I do mine. There's tons of different carbon calculators on the web. This is the one I really like. And I plugged in my numbers and I've plotted it over here. You probably can't see so well, but there's 5 categories: travel, home, food, goods, and services. And so for my household, when I plugged all the numbers in, I found that we were emitting about 49 tons of carbon a year. So we're above the average Maryland household. And I was really shocked by that, because I'm pretty smug when it comes to climate activism. I think I really do well. I'm a vegetarian. I hardly ever drive my car. I turn the heat down, blah, 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 blah. Line dry my clothes. If you know me, you know I'm smug about that. It's electricity. Our house leaks heat like a sieve. When we first moved in, more smugness, we put in geothermal. Yeah, we're all set, right? Yeah. But no, I got rid of that oil burner. But because our house leaks so much, it was $900 in January to heat our 4-bedroom house, right? It's not a big house, but you know, we go, and so what we should have done at first was insulated the house. And we haven't done that yet. So that's my climate action right now, is to insulate our house. And we're also looking into solar panels. If I can do that, I can bring that, you know, if I have all solar energy, that gets rid of 18. I'm down to 30 tons of carbon for my family, so 7.5 each. We're doing great if I can get rid of that electricity. And I think this is a huge ticket item for Potomac. We have the money to install solar panels, to build community solar projects. And I would love to see us also sharing that with other communities,
How
but
have you done on windows?
we put new windows in too. We did all the things that we should have done the insulation first. New windows, new roof, geothermal. And then we were like, what about that insulation? The guy came over and did one of those flow
Yeah.
things. He's like, yeah, I can't even get a measurement. Your house is just, it's too leaky. So hopefully the insulation will.
Pepco's got a project. They came yesterday and replaced 18 of my bulbs
Oh, yes, that's
to
fantastic.
make them all the incandescent bulbs, right?
The LED bulbs.
Yeah,
Yep, I've got that on a slide here.
they did this free. I
Oh,
had no
excellent.
idea. I
I
thought it
didn't
was
know
a
that.
racket, but they just called and
That.
they even did that,
So
literally,
so-
18.
Then I have a slide later that shows that about replacing about 10 incandescent bulbs on average saves a ton of carbon a year.
Yeah.
It's big. I thought that was one of those, yeah, just feel good about yourself and forget it. But no, it's a huge impact. So well
She
done.
said I paid for it in my tank.
No, well done on you. So that's on the next slide, and these are just, different things that we can do to reduce our carbon averages, right? And the bubble shows how much that does. So purchasing green electricity for the average person will save about 6 tons of carbon a year.
Mhm.
Eliminating a cross-country flight, there's our fair share right there, one cross-country flight. I'm doing that next week, so. Well, we all can't be perfect, we have to do these things. One that was interesting to me was being a safer driver. Driving saves half a ton.
Reducing speed.
Reducing speed by just 5 miles per hour and rapid braking and acceleration. So it saves quite a bit of carbon, so that was interesting. And then this is just a whole like slew of different things you can do. I think I had light bulbs on there, yeah. Replace 10 incandescent light bulbs with almost a ton, right? That's a lot, right? This was one of my smug things. It's not really that big.
Yeah. Oh, like when we
It's
were
not
kids.
really that big.
Yeah.
I like it. I like to be outside. There's lots of different little things we can do, but I think it's like turning the thermostat down 5 degrees is only 0.3. I'm not freezing anymore for that at this point anyway. I gotta get the electricity sorted first, right? So this was interesting to me. This is cutting for food, cutting 5 servings a week of various things. Meat is, you save a ton if you reduce 5 servings of, and there's a lot of talk about reducing our meat consumption. Do you have a question?
No, I was just saying some of it's kind of sad because you think eating nuts is a good thing.
I know.
That's all.
I know, and nuts are really big on water consumption
Yes,
too.
exactly.
So,
Almonds.
and is it,
like,
yes, almonds.
like-
Yeah, I'd heard that too. So it's just like, you're so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of people feel that way about red meat. And then I'll also say that red meat is, important for climate change. It is, that's a ton, but it's not huge. It's not like these other things like electricity or that sort of thing. The thing that gets conflated with red meat is that, I mean, I think it's, for other reasons, I think it's hugely important to reduce our red meat intake. If we look at all the other resources that we have, stable climate being a resource, if we look at our soils, if we look at biodiversity, if we look at clean air, clean water, ocean health, I can't remember, toxic-free environment, I can't remember, that's all of them, but red meat drives the destruction of all of those by over 50% in all of them. Deforestation and loss of biodiversity, 80, 90, 95% of biodiversity loss is due to livestock raising. So seafood has its own issues because we've overfished so much. And so, but then I personally don't like the idea of farmed fish so much. It's kind of a little gross. You know, those tanks are a little bit. So I think just moderation with seafood. And there are certifications for seafood. I don't know if you've come across those. The Stewardship Council, Marine Stewardship Council. There's a couple certifications that only certify fisher people who fish in a sustainable manner and don't use like drag nets. Like sadly, I mean, shrimp is really a horrible food to eat. I love shrimp, but they drag net and they destroy ecosystems along the ocean to collect the shrimp. So I have shrimp like on my birthday and, you know, and not, because I would have it every time I went out. So I just try to make it a special thing and it makes it a celebration. And so that's the way that I deal with that. So anyway, so my eco action for lifestyle is installing the installation of solar panels. I don't know if any of you feel like you have actions you want to take on, if you want to discuss those or not, or I can just keep moving to Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
See?
I have a question about the sources for Maryland electricity. I believe I've read that Maryland has a cleaner electric provision than other states.
I presume so,
I
yeah.
mean, I think I was looking it up and so, I don't know if that's factored into your analysis or if you're more on a global level.
No, I mean, like my footprint, right?
Uh-huh.
That would have used that. The climate calculator would have used my zip code to look at our.
And
what
as your
type of-
provider for Pepco.
Yeah, yeah. So there is community solar available to some people in Potomac. I signed up when I first got here and I'm still on the waiting list. That was 6 years ago. And it's something that I think they're trying to, it's really complicated because there's proposals to put solar farms up in the ag reserve. And that's complicated because ag reserve's lovely and we want space for wild animals. So I think maybe it's houses and buildings. I'd love to see the Giant and Safeway buildings covered in solar panels. I'd love to see the schools covered in solar panels. So that's one of my pet projects that I'm really interested in, is trying to get more solar in Potomac.
But what if it's I personally believe nuclear is the ultimate answer,
Nuclear is an answer.
but so I think it's the ultimate answer for the whole country if they can really adopt the fusion technology
Well, if
and
we
make
could
it
have
workable
fusion,
and all that. It's gonna take a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yeah, and we've been talking.
Is
for a
this
long time.
therefore still going to be helpful if you put solar on now?
Yes, first of all,
Certainly, there's an
because
immediate effect.
first, there's the immediate effect for
Yeah.
one thing, and solar will theoretically last, I guess, if the panel, 25 years is the average life, or lifetime guaranteed, that's what we're getting on ours. And building a nuclear factory, well, fusion would be great, there's not waste, right? in
Sure.
fusion. But we don't have that yet, we don't have that technology, and we have been trying for decades to get that to work. I don't know if we're gonna get there. Fission, you know, that's where,
Fusion,
that's the way
not
France is gone, but,
fusion.
you know,
They've done some marvelous things recently,
no, I haven't kept up with that,
particularly
so.
for small communities.
Yeah,
I noticed you don't have anything on recycling. So in my mind, I always like thinking of personal action.
yeah,
Reduce,
that is my classic case.
recycle.
Yeah, and,
So-
yeah, absolutely, I'm glad you brought that up,
Because I was
because
thinking of reducing, just reduction of whatever I emit personally. You know,
Yeah, it's
not shopping.
yeah, I think that, of those three, it is in that order.
Yeah.
It's when recycling is at the
Bottom.
bottom.
Right.
And I think it's great that we recycle. I want everyone to keep doing that. It doesn't have a huge impact for climate.
Right.
It does have an impact for materials and it's not a huge impact, frankly, but I think it's good for us all to do it. It also reminds us of how much like plastic waste we're creating. Only about a tiny percentage of plastic gets recycled, even of the
Right.
stuff that we put in the bins.
Right.
Because it's so complicated. There's so many additives
Yeah.
to plastics. It's really hard to recycle. So that's one of those things that I think is great that we do it and show our commitment to that and build that identity as an eco warrior, which is so important, but I have a huge impact.
Okay.
So I have taken to actually not washing out the disgusting moldy mayonnaise jar I find in the back. I just put it in the bin. I used to spend like 20 minutes and how much water
Right.
cleaning it, you know, so I'm just like, you know, that's just, and it just makes life easier and I don't feel guilty anymore about that. I do think, yeah, recycling, that's how I started as an eco-activist, was recycling on my campus, you know.
I'm seeing in our younger generation,
Yep,
more of a commitment to the reduce
yes, you too,
part of it.
absolutely,
I'm seeing,
absolutely.
groups that are trading clothing.
Yeah.
Used clothing that are
Yeah.
trading furniture
Yeah,
That's
and not
great.
even, charging anything.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need this anymore and community swap meets.
yeah, there's stuff online too.
That's
There's
great.
groups online, Free Cycle online in
Mhm.
Potomac. If you're done with something, you can just put it up there and,
Mhm.
yeah. No, I've seen that too, Karen, and it's really encouraging. I can't get my kids interested in anything material, which means they're not interested in having a job either. Minuses, right? You know, where's that capitalist drive?
Rob, you were just telling me this morning that there are two industries that have really, gone up in value in recent times, and that's used clothing,
Oh,
Really?
companies have
Uh,
gone up
no
in value
that's interesting.
because
Well, tariffs, it's kind of a tariff and recession play, so
Yeah.
it's another matter, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the younger generation does seem more attuned to these things. And I'm so sad that we're leaving this big mess for them, but I'm glad that they're engaged and trying to do their little bits. So that's good. Politics. Protests are effective. This is something that took me a long time to understand. I always thought that they weren't effective, and that was the reason I told myself that I wouldn't go to them. But they are hugely effective. These are three really famous ones, of course, the civil rights movement, the falling of the Berlin Wall, and the Salt March in India. All peaceful, mostly, protests that did result in policy change, social change. There's so many different ways that protests make an impact. They don't necessarily make an immediate impact, but they certainly impact the people that go and make them more active later. They can create a cohesion around a community that allows them to move forward. They do impact policy to some degree and judges to some degree, but they impact the federal workers. There was an op-ed piece in The Guardian last month about a federal worker who said protests changed how we implemented policies dramatically because they would give them language. The placards are becoming a big thing now. What sign you bring to a protest. It would give them language to argue in meetings. It would give them strength and conviction to argue with people. And so they do have an impact. And research shows time and again that you probably can't read that, sorry, with the weird orange color. This is a famous book, Why Civil Resistance Works. The second half of that title, which I didn't have on there for some reason, is Peaceful Resistance. No regime has ever withstood 3.5% of their population protesting. So that's an interesting fact. If you're interested in going to protests, this Indivisible Montgomery is a good resource, and I urge you to read the Quakers' Guide to Staying Safe at a Protest if you decide to go. I've been to a number. They've been really quiet and peaceful and lovely. And we are really close to DC. There's protests going on all the time. There's 24-hour protests downtown. That's not climate change. So, but there are environmental protests that go on. So that is useful. Contacting your representatives, another political thing that we can do. Research has shown that at the state level, a grassroots campaign results in legislators being 12 to 20% greater chance of voting in the direction of the grassroots campaign. At the federal level, just 50 personalized messages impact whether or not the representative votes in the way that we want. And by personalized, that can be anything from, I'm a climate change researcher and I understand that this is horrible, to my dad and I used to fish on such and such a river and that's getting flooded and I can't fish there anymore. I want to bring my kids there. Apparently those work better. So personalize it however you want. That is really key to making a greater impact. I listed over here the different ways we can get in touch with our representatives. Going into their office is apparently the most effective way, but it's not that much bigger than sending an email, letter, or a phone call. Social media, not so big an impact. For the phone calls, I'm really phone shy. And I've heard a trick to call after hours. And then you just leave a message on the message machine and you say, hi, this is Pru Foster. I'm in Potomac. My phone number is blah, blah, blah. I'm calling to urge you to support Bill HB 742. Let's have clean water in Potomac. And the reason why is because I want to go fishing. And I love fishing and it makes me feel very happy. So thank you. And that's all you have to do. So that's a good idea if you're phone shy. There's various ways you can get alerts, environmental alerts. I really like the Union of Concerned Scientists, no surprise. Sierra Club has alerts. They're very active politically, Sierra Club, and Green America also has good alerts. There's tons of those. And all that stuff's listed on the back of your sheet if you're interested in that. So me, I've made a resolution to call a representative daily. I can just do that,
Wow.
5 minutes. I can just do that. I have numbers in my phone. It's easy. I get like so many alerts that I haven't been doing it. I haven't been calling any of them because I'm just like overwhelmed. Like, just do one. It's really easy. I have plenty to say on pretty much any topic, so I can pick up the phone and make that's easy for me. That's not gonna be easy for everybody, but for me, that's an easy one. And pardon the middle finger, money. Where do we spend our money? This is sort of a pluses and minuses to money. There's a bunch of certifications of ethical companies, B Corp being the most famous certification. You can look at the B Corp website and find, so where are you spending your money? You're spending your money with companies that have bad social and economic, environmental practices or not. If you're B Corp certified, they have the social and environmental good practices. They have a legal commitment to all stakeholders, not just the people that own the stock, but to everyone that they're mining in a place. They have to make sure that the mining is done carefully for those people, and they have transparency. There's a couple charity watchdogs if you want to give money to charities, if you want to spend your money that way. And then there's not spending money at places. There are a slew of boycotts. They are effective. After a while, it takes a boycott a while to get going. These are all being boycotted now for various reasons, which is exhausting. And then just a list of some successful boycotts. I don't really want to go into the detail of that. We can think about where we're spending our money. We can try to spend it on charities that are doing good work. I really like this for I give gifts of charity to my family. Oh boy, am I smug? I know, but that's what their Christmas gifts usually are, right? And I like to check it out. I know this person's interested in marine wildlife. Is this a good organization? I don't know that much about it. And these Charity Navigator and Charity Watch are really good for that. There's some banks that actually have this B Corp certification. Banks, I don't really know what this estimate of $7 trillion is, but banks have given $7 trillion to fossil fuel firms since the Paris deal, which is the agreement in 2015 to try to limit warming to 2015 to 1 point. I'm talking too fast. Yeah. Since the Paris deal was when most of the governments in the world, except for 3, and now the US has joined that list. Except for Iran, Libya, and Syria, and the United States, every other country in the world has agreed to try to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. That's the Paris deal. And since that deal, banks have given $7 trillion to fossil fuel firms. That's in addition to those subsidies back on that plot way back at the beginning. So banks, we put our money in them. They use that money to invest where they want. That's something that we can think about, we bank at HSBC, which is one of the worst banks in the world, but they are international. It's been seamless for us to work with them because we used to live in the UK and here. I would love to switch over to one of these banks. Partner has different ideas, but there are banks that have certified B Corp, which is great. Other certifications. So you can think about banking there. And we can also think about divestment. I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, there was a big move to divest, get universities to divest from fossil fuel companies. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Where's our pension fund? What stocks do we buy? So there's a divestment movement, but there's also a counter argument to divestment. And that is if you're part of a pension fund or a union, get engaged instead. Don't just say, no, we don't want anything to do with you, but get engaged and say, we want you to have better practices. So I don't know the answer to this question. Personally, I'm never going to get engaged with stockholder meetings, so it's easier for me to just go to the divest route, but it's not my strength. So anyway, so for me, my financial actions are fairly small, I should say. I avoid Walmart and Amazon. I support the independent media, which is hugely important in this day and age, so we can know what's going on with the climate. So by that, I mean media that doesn't get funding from any kind of industry. It's like a charity, like the say NPR. I don't think they get money from, they have a little bit of a left leaning, not so much. They're fairly unbiased to many people's surprise, but in the classic independent media ones that are very unbiased are the AP, the Associated Press, Reuters is really good, and the BBC are really good. And I give money to Union of Concerns and just keep a number of other. All right, then I'm gonna whiz through these because you guys know these things. The last two are engagement and community, which is what we did this morning. We engaged and we learned. We built community this morning. Then those are the other two main action items. We can engage our minds, of course, and community networks and public opinion, talking with our friends and family. That's you have such an opportunity to do in this church with your mixed group of people who have different views than you. Most of us live in bubbles where we don't get to interact with people from different views. And I think that's really sad. And it's so great. I'm so pleased that you have that. Good work, you guys. So, one part of engagement is combating polarization, that's the root of it all, right? And it's all frothed up. In my opinion, we have common ground, right? We all want to live in beautiful places with green and clean air, and we want a healthy future for our children and all these things. We have so much in common, and we've been polarized to both by the media and politicians to ring fence us into their groups, and at left and right, this is going on. These are two groups that work to reduce polarization. And I'm really interested in those. In the UK, they have a Dining Across the Divide series where they go out to dinner with people from with different viewpoints.
Fantastic.
Pardon?
That's fantastic.
It is.
Yes.
It is good.
Because we're all the victim of confirmation bias.
Absolutely. So stuff we heard this morning, seek common ground. Don't start off. And for me, learning from my years of interacting with my in-laws who have taught me so much, is I don't start conversations with them trying to change their mind. I start conversations trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
and it was a shift, I'll tell you. Some rough moments. So yes, so it is hard to listen. There's wisdom in all of us. Totally believe that. So engagement, I think, is some of the most important work we can do. Nice quote. There's two quotes. I'll just read Lincoln's because I love it. In this age, and I think it's so true today, in this age, in this country, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Against it, nothing can succeed. Whoever molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces judicial decisions.
And Lincoln said that.
That's Lincoln, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the same stories today,
Yeah.
right? Civil War time, right? It was pretty polarized then as well, so pardon me. So anyway, this is my bread and butter. I will continue reading, engaging my mind and writing and talking. So in addition to my book, I write a now very occasional newsletter about environmental issues, sometimes bleeding into other things. So then community, we all know the importance of community. It makes it safe, our neighborhood safe and stable. All these things. We all know the value of community. I don't need to go through this with you guys. So this is something I'm interested in about community. And I talked to my friend Alan last night, he's a political scientist, and he's like, don't use the word pig tent coalition. It's like, well, I already submitted my slides, so there it is. And what that is, I don't know if you guys know that phrase, but I'm almost done, just by the way. That's the idea that it's usually used in politics, that you gather around a single idea or ideal, and you forget about your differences in politics or religion or that sort of thing, and say, this is the ideal we want to work towards. And I think that in Potomac, we could work towards the ideal, regardless of where we come from, of improving our environmental impact, and especially our carbon footprint. So this is something that, and as I've been here in Potomac, at first I felt very isolated, but only in the last year, I've really felt a connection found out about all these other people in Potomac who are doing environmental work. There's so many different people doing stuff out there. I'm so encouraged by that, but we don't know about each other. So I would like another one of my projects is to try to build a little bit more community around environmental action in Potomac. And things that we're doing for that, we started an email list. We had an event back in September. Karen helped with that. Thank you, Karen. And we started an email group out of that where we can post environmental actions and that sort of thing. And we're also starting an eco coffee. We haven't really decided on the details of that yet. We're going to meet at Bagel and Grind, probably twice a month at some point. And anyone who wants drop-in thing, just come and chat about something that you want help with. That's the other thing for the email list. I need help. I need people to call. I didn't know about the 4K run. That's not, or the 5K run in July 4th. I'd love to do that. That's not necessarily environmental, but that's like-minded in community, and we're happy to include that kind of thing in those conversations. So, or have that sent out on the email list. So, and Potomac, I think I already listed those things. Yeah, we're wealthy, we're well-educated, we're part of Montgomery County, which is just fantastic in its environmental, social inclusion, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so if you're interested in working on that, just let me know. Any conversation you want to have about the climate, yay, talk to me. So that's my community work right now. And so I have my action plan. I want to do that insulation and solar panels. I'm going to do my daily call. I'm going to support these organizations I care about. I'm going to continue writing and talking, and Big Tent Coalition. And then note to self, when you go off on your retreat, on your sabbatical, don't forget self-care. Don't forget that. It's so important. And make time for joy. It's so important. That play is so important. I could do a whole talk about the importance of that. And also for me, because just to acknowledge the ongoing commitments I have, because sometimes I'll be working on the minutes of some board I sit on. Like, this isn't useful. This isn't important. And yes, it is. Those things are important. Maryland Native Plant Society, which I sit on the board of, it's an important thing. So I acknowledge that that's a fine thing to spend my time on. So, do you have an action plan? And that's it. That's the end. Thank you for engaging and building community. Well done.
You have time for a couple of
I
questions?
do, yeah.
Can I ask the first question?
Please.
Or let me,
No.
one of the challenges, I think, I support all of your goals, and we've done, we've taken steps ourselves. We have solar panels for 13 years on our roof and all that. But one of the big challenges, I think, is the kind of the corner solutions that many people look for. So, like, natural gas is a lower carbon footprint than coal, and a lot of the reduction of CO2 that we're seeing is because this area got 50% of its electricity from coal 20 years ago, and now it's like 18%.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason why. But I'm just curious, a lot of people are if it's not they make the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I'm curious, I see a lot of people who are like, unless it's 100% renewables, it's zero, I can't support it.
Yeah.
Or the other thing is, often there are challenges of the progressive left, which I am a member of in many ways, but like, we have wind resources in the Chesapeake, we have a demand for 6 million people for electricity over here. And we have LLCs that will invest and produce the windmills, and we have LLCs that will pay for the connection line. We have to go across 11 jurisdictions to get the power there, and many, county executives would just say, we're not going to build anything. We're not going to allow the lines to be built. And so it seems like we do need to have a practical solution to climate change, not just like it has to be all one thing.
Absolutely.
Do you have any views on that?
Absolutely. And I think that the left is very critical of itself, of other people. There's competition and I do not feel that in my right-leaning in-laws. You believe what you think the same way I do. You're part of the group. Come on in. We can argue about it, but there's just so much more support there. I think that is a big problem with the left. And this one-upmanship and there's a lack of humility, which I think is part of what drove a lot of Americans away from the left, because there's a smugness to it, which I will acknowledge. I have that problem, and I try to rein it in. But anyway, so that's just a little confession from the up here, but, I think that, solutions, I mean, it's the same problem as building solar panels on the ag reserve. There's a way to do it on the, I don't know about the transmission lines. I do know there was a big, thing in Western Maryland, this legislative session about power lines going through, which my, Maryland Native Plant Society wanted to argue against. And I was like, can't really argue against that one, guys. We got to move power around if you want to have power in your houses. So, I didn't know enough about that. But in the ag reserve, I know that the solar panels originally were supposed to only go on really degraded soil sites. And now it's been pushed over and so there are ways to do it that seems that would be, what's the word? Not complimentary, but there's a C word in there. Thoughtful, I'm not thinking of the right word, but compassionate. I don't know what the right word is, but that would work. And I think there's different, it has to be
Compatible.
compatible, that's good. But I'm wanting more thoughtfulness in there. I'm wanting efficient, yeah, not there yet, but
Yeah.
Wait, let me just try to say, I think that the solutions need to be bespoke to different regions. You know, I don't think it has to be a one size fits all. You know, you've got solar panels, it's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. Well done. Now, I had a question here first, Karen.
Well, I was you kind of skipped over electric cars. I just finished reading 6-7 research papers, all of which concluded while hybrids are an excellent idea, electric cars are not.
Oh, really?
And that they produce almost as much pollution as gas because of the amount of energy that is needed to create the various batteries and power that power these cars.
I don't understand how that would be the case.
I don't pretend
electrics
to
and
have done the research myself, but they
Yeah.
all concluded this. They liked hybrids.
Yeah.
And they talked a great deal of the practicality of electric cars,
They're getting
travel
more,
and
they're
all
getting more
But they
practical.
talked a lot about the pollution ability that generally gets overlooked and the need for, what is this, titanium, is it? Which
The rare
comes
earth,
from
yeah.
Ukraine, one of
Yeah.
the reasons we need
Yeah.
Ukraine's
I'm
deposit.
aware of that.
But
yeah.
which is a terrible, terrible substance,
Yeah.
apparently.
That's a complicated, so I've read a number of papers
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
and the research is not conclusive supporting the view that you said.
Yeah.
It's more mixed.
No, I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't followed
From a
that.
pollution standpoint, perhaps, yeah.
Well, there's so many different kinds of pollution. So what, I mean,
Yeah.
are you talking about carbon? Oh, so Karen, and then, yeah.
So you talked about Potomac, which is great, and we're a subset of Potomac
Yeah.
here at the church.
Yeah,
And we have, session members here and, the church is long lived. Are there things that we should be doing as a church community here in this location? You know, should we be considering solar? Should we be considering?
I would encourage everyone to consider solar, especially as a long-lived institution. Within 7 years, you pay it back and then you have free electricity.
Wow.
And you have really great exposure here, right? There's not trees. I would assume you have good roofs.
Yeah.
Space for that. It is a chunk of change at the beginning. So it is difficult, and native plants, of course.
Native
Native
plants.
plants everywhere. I think they were back there first. So I think you were back, there was one back there.
Lisa said, where are we with being able to sell solar power back to Pepco?
Where are we?
Where, is that possible?
Yeah, that's what our solar model will be. We're not gonna have batteries actually at our house. We're just gonna,
And they've
sell it.
accepted that, because they used
Yep.
to make this
and they have to
crazy
pay.
argument that, oh, we provide the infrastructure.
Yeah,
But why can't they be like the gas company? You pay one thing for the infrastructure and another
Yeah.
for
I know that they have to pay us the rate that we pay
the.
for
Right,
the
well,
electricity we
that's
put
fair.
back, which is
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
score.
okay, so that's
so.
progress, because they resisted that.
Yeah, so behind you, there was a question too. I
It
think.
seems to me that Maryland representatives are more climate aware than many representatives
Absolutely.
in other states.
Yeah,
I was wondering, is it effective at all to contact representatives out of the
no, not really. Not really. How you're gonna say, it is effective still to call our representatives and say thank you. That does mean a lot to them. I know, I struggle with that one, so are my phone calls useful? I don't know, but it will make me feel better. And there are some that they, and that's, I mean, we joke, I laugh about that, but that is important. But, there are issues that they aren't supporting. So that are like the endangered species. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's not getting into that detail, but yeah, that's a really good question. And something that I would like to think about more.
Some representatives don't believe in climate change.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I think they were over here first and then there was one back over here.
Did you already ask for it?
Well, you sort of answered half of my question.
Okay,
Oh,
From John's
yeah,
question. So then I'll skip that part. I was just gonna ask you whether your actions and your talk was prepared in spite of or because of the current administration's attitude towards climate.
yeah, I came back to climate activism when he was reelected. I had given it up. I was really into native plants and creating biodiverse habitats. That was my passion for the 6 years I've been in Potomac. And when he was reelected, I knew he'd take us out of the Paris Agreement, which he did on his first day. But so on that note, I didn't put this in my slides, but you should know that over 60% of the US economy is still dedicated to the Paris Agreement. Governors, there's like 26 governors who have said, we're still part of the Paris Agreement. There are hundreds of towns in the US, thousands of businesses in the US, which have said, we still believe in the Paris, we're still committed to it.
Okay.
So, but it was, I mean, Trump, I think they estimate that he will raise global temperature by 0.05 degrees. So,
But this,
so that did make me, yes, it dragged me back in. I don't really want to be here necessarily, but I feel that that's where my strength is, and that's where I need to be working. I think there were some behind, no, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah.
I'll get to you, Bob.
Maybe one more question, because we're
Yeah, we're at time.
we're at time, so
All right, well,
take his
then
question.
I'll talk to Bob after.
Yeah.
In fact, quickly, a former contractor many years ago.
Yeah.
Installed solar collectors on homes. And we worked so hard to get the right alignments and
Yeah,
whatever, and to be as efficient as we could
yeah,
to do it. And now my own home, I haven't done it because I have to, they come out and done analysis, I have to cover every inch of my roof
yeah,
with collectors, and I still don't meet enough collection because of the alignment in order to make it efficient. I mean, I got a very small,
yeah, yeah.
exposure that, is it worthwhile to spend all the extra money to put in all this and still not have it work?
Probably not, but I would say that
Shade too.
we've been told no by 2 solar companies, and then we had a family-owned company that said the other companies are wanting, they want to make a profit off of you. And they had different financial models, so that they were like renting you the solar panels and then they would get the money back. And that wasn't good enough for them. So, but the private company said, this will pay you back in 7 years. So even though we have a tiny south-facing roof, so we're actually going on our east-facing roof. Instead, they did a study and it came up with 7-year payback time. So is it worth it? I don't know. We decided it was for 7 years. Anyway,
We want to thank you so much for your time and for your passion
Yeah.
and for
Thank
your
you.
sharing that with us today.
thank you. Thank you for
And,
listening. Get in touch.
Yeah,
If
that,
you're interested.
that Big Tent idea that we're not, Big Tent coalition that
Yeah.
we're not supposed to say out loud.
Yeah,
That could be sort of interesting in
That's
some
fun.
kind of partnership.
that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love that. Yeah.
So thank you so much. If you wanted to hang out, I know there were a couple other people that had hands up.
Yeah,
If you
I'm
wanted
happy to
do a
answer some
one-on-one
questions.
with
I'm a
them.
bit warm.
And if others need, are you warm? If others need to head out, then now, thank you.